So I'll try to do my best to keep up to par with the previous presentations and try to really tell you a little bit about how we at Microsoft secure Azure, the approach, the processes, the tools that we're using to try and secure cloud at the magnitude of the Microsoft cloud. I can tell you it's pretty challenging. A lot of the learnings and experiences we had for Windows are things that we're bringing forward to the cloud. And a lot of things that the previous speakers kind of discussed and mentioned around prevent, detect, response apply even in the cloud scale. And I'm going to try and talk to that a little bit as well. So first, when we at Microsoft run our cloud services, we understand the responsibility that we have as cloud operators. The way that I'd like to think about it is, at the end of the day, you, the customer, you bring your businesses, you run your critical workload on our cloud, on our business. And for us, there is no, or at least the way I see it, there is no bigger responsibility for us. We would kind of tie our bonds together to a point where you trust your business on us, Microsoft. And that's a pretty significant impact and responsibility. So to make sure we meet those requirements, we meet those expectations, we operate against a pretty strict set of principles that we define. And those principles apply to everything that we run in Microsoft, any infrastructure or cloud or application that we provide. First, of course, security or integrity and confidentiality of the data. I'm going to cover that a little bit later in the presentation, but you can assume that that's by far our #1 focus area in Microsoft. Without that, I don't think that we really have anything to do in that space. If we look at how we distribute our efforts in terms of engineering efforts, in terms of focus, security is by far the #1 investment area that we're making it to secure our cloud, especially to secure Azure. Second is around privacy and control. And again, at the end of the day, it's your data. You chose to bring your data and your business to the cloud. If we can't guarantee you that you have at any point of time full control over your data, understand where it's stored, understand who accesses it, understand on which continent it sits, understand where it was backed up to, the credentials that we use, exactly how they're managed. If we can't guarantee that, then again, we have nothing to do in that space. Third is compliance. And this is one of those things that we all love to hate. We all live in some regulatory space. We all need to comply with one or more compliance requirements. And one of the things that we're trying to make sure that we do in Azure is to take that out of the way. Today, Azure or Microsoft have over 53 different certifications across global, US, industry-specific, or regional. Transparency is an interesting one. And again, that goes back, I think, to the relationship between us as Microsoft and the customer. At the end of the day, when you run your critical workload on Azure, and it doesn't matter what I promised to you as a cloud operator, you should be able to also, in a way, audit the way that we operate the cloud. Really understand how we run our services, understand how our engineers operate, and really provide or conduct an audit, let's put it this way, to us as cloud operators. But today I want to focus on really 3 main pillars that we use when we operate the cloud. Platform, which is essentially everything from the physical infrastructure that we use to run our cloud all the way up to the applications and the controls that we provide at that level. Intelligence, which is essentially the way that we make sense of the billions or trillions of signals that we collect every single day, such that we can make security sense and improve our overall security posture. And third is really the way that we partner, not just with ISVs, but both with our peers, governments, and law agencies to really make sure that we have full picture on the security of our cloud. So talk a little bit about the platform piece. I like to think about the cloud platform like one big operating system. Right? Maybe it's something that we bring from my operating system days. But the way to think about the cloud is we have a lot of foundational components, a lot of low-level services that we run to kind of make this machine work. And that starts everything from physical security, right? At the end of the day, if we can't secure our own data center, nothing else matters. We have today over 42 regions worldwide. Each one of them have multiple data centers, and really we're at the point that we almost can't build our capacity fast enough to meet the demand. And of course, you should assume that all of those data centers have world-class security, perimeters, fences, really good processes on how to handle hardware going in and out of the data centers. On top of that, the hardware itself, the hardware that we use for Azure and for our cloud. A lot of it, of course, is custom-made hardware that we spec. We do all of the security reviews for the firmware that we consume. Today, we also, in some cases, we develop our own hardware. We've announced last year Project Cerberus, which is essentially our own root of trust. We develop our own chip that allows us to measure and attest for every piece of software that runs on the infrastructure, from the firmware all the way up to the applications. Operational security, that talks about everything from the secure development lifecycle through secure deployment, pen testing, scanning, vuln scanning, patching, everything that you would expect to see in the lifecycle of software. And the customer security controls is, I like to define it as the interface between the operating system and the user. This is all of the functionality that we provide, or security functionality that we provide as part of the platform. That's access control, credential management, software-defined network, and security features of that network, and so forth. On the second side of that security or platform coin, this is the application layer. This is where we have the identity. This is where we have the identity control plane, information protection, threat protection, and the overall security management. Those are the security controls that essentially we integrate into everything in our platform, from Office 365 to Windows to EMS and any other product that we have, that we sell or provide as a service. Now, I want to go back to the operational security I mentioned earlier. And I heard in the previous talks, someone talked about the protect, detect, response. It's a framework. It's not a new framework, right? We've all been using it for years. We understand what it means. We have a lot of focus on protect, and there is a lot we need to do there, from endpoint protection to edge protection to access control. Those are all things that we've been doing for years, and we know that no matter how much we're going to try hard, it almost feels like it's not enough, right? There's always going to be some gap. There's always going to be some hole that an adversary is going to take advantage of. So we started investing a lot in the detection space. And we have everything from traditional detections to machine learning-based, AI-based, and you name it. The industry is really still growing and is still developing in that space, but we understand that at some point someone is going to breach us, and we need to have the right signals in the right place. The third piece of that circle, the response, is where we should be able to take a known bad state in our environment and bring it back to a good known state, to the protect. And I think that, at least in my observation, as an industry, this is one area that we're not doing enough. This is one area where today we know that on average it takes about 200 days for a company just to detect that it's been breached. And from that point, the ability to take known bad state and bring it back to known good state is very ad hoc. Right? When a company knows that it breached, now what? Okay, now we're going to start figuring out what we want to do. We're trying to figure out, how do we figure out the blast radius? How do we figure out containment? How do we figure out eradication? How do we figure out recovery? Right? All of those things are concepts that are very immature today in the security space, and something that we need to invest in more. So, there you go. One of the things that we do starting to implement in Microsoft, something that we call assume breach. Right? I'm sure you heard it before. And essentially, that talks to the fact that at any given point of time, any engineer, any PM, any person in Microsoft should assume that not that we will be breached, that we are breached, that we have an adversary in our network that's already doing some reconning, trying to already start collect data in the network, and it's just a matter of time before something bad really going to happen, right? It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, and then what do we really do? So what we're starting to do in Microsoft, and it's a process that we're still learning and we're refining, we go through a process that we call breach preparedness. right? And it sounds maybe a bit trivial, but the idea there is for any given service, and think in your head a service, a product, a system that you have, what would be the breach scenarios that you would care about? Right? You can think about some things that are very basic. We have an adversary that have a foothold on a VM. It can be that someone have access to data. It can be someone have access to some sensitive credential, right? But you should think about the different breach scenarios. Now, for each of those scenarios, other than understanding whether or not you have the detection, you need to think, well, how do I understand what's the blast radius if I detect something like that? Right? How far did it go? Right? Is that localized? Is that something that is much broader in my system? How do I contain something like that? What does it look like? Is it just around, I don't know, repaving a machine? Is that about rolling a credential across it? I mean, what does it mean to even contain something like that, and how do you recover? Right? And think, and maybe just show of hands, how many of you really feel that you have such plan in place for your systems in your enterprise? Right? It's like no one. And I appreciate the honesty, right? It's a really hard problem. The thing is that I don't feel that we necessarily invest enough to get to that point. So now, once we do this exercise for our services in the infrastructure, and you can think about, pretty large-scale services, right? Think about our compute service. Think about storage. Think about networking services. If something happened to any of those services, the impact on our entire infrastructure and business is amazing, right? It's going to be pretty bad for us in the amazing way. So what we do is the breach preparedness, and then what we do is what we call the continuous validation. We have more than one red team, more than one blue team, and we're continuously doing those red teaming and blue teaming exercises. And then once something does happen, we go through what we call a post-breach exercise, which is, okay, the red team got foothold to one of the services. Now the service team itself has to go and understand, okay, how do I recover from something like that? Is my playbook good enough? Are my engineers educated enough to even know who to call to start the recovery process? So again, it's a work in progress, but this is one area that we figured out we really need to invest in as a company and as a cloud operator. The next area I wanted to cover is environment isolation. And environment isolation essentially talked to the fact that it is very natural for us to try and keep our email system, HR system, maybe some of our development environment under a single, let's call it identity control plane, right? It's the same directory. Me as a developer, even if I have my smart card, I still use it kind of to log in for email. I use it to go to my HR systems, and I might be able to also use it to write code and for production. And this is one of those things that we sometimes need to balance cost and complexity versus security. And I like to think about it in the kind of the analogy of a ship, right? I mean, we should build ships with as many airtight compartments as possible, such that even if something goes bad or to one of those, the entire ship is not going to sink, right? We're still going to have enough airtight compartments to kind of keep this ship afloat. So one of those areas that we keep investing in Microsoft, and again, you can think about it at the cloud scale between Office 365 and Azure and some of the other services, is we are completely segregating all of our environments, right? And segregation not just in the context of the identity control plane, but also in the developer, what we call the SAW, Secure Access Workstation, or Secure Admin Workstation. So it's not only through the identity work plane, but also to make sure that the developer workstations themselves cannot be used as pivot points for adversaries to move between our environments. Definitely something that adds complexity to developers or to day-to-day work of developers, but something that we heavily believe that really slows down significantly adversaries as they try to laterally move through environments. Intelligence. So intelligence, again, is our ability to make sense of the trillions of signals that we have and collect on an ongoing basis in Microsoft. So at the centerpiece of what we call intelligence is what we call the Microsoft Intelligence Security Graph. And the best way to explain maybe what the Intelligence Security Graph is it's our ability to sanitize huge amounts of data or signals that we collect from all of those different assets that we have in Microsoft. right? If you just look at what big data means to us, is our ability to process more than 1 million telemetry events per second, right? And this is just from the Azure platform. The signals that we get from Windows, right? 930 million just detections or malware detections on endpoints, right? So just the numbers and the number of signals that we get from our environment are really, really staggering. Now, this is just one piece, right? The data by itself doesn't tell us anything. On top of this data, we layer all of our TI or threat intelligence feeds, right? And they come from our own internal research. It comes from industry partners. It comes from law agencies. It comes from governments. But at the end of the day, this kind of correlation of the signals that we get plus the data feeds or the TI feeds is really what kind of makes this thing work. And maybe the way to think about the security graph is how do we take all those data points and turn that into something that we can make correlation between those points and really make sense out of that. Actually, in the previous presentation, the concept of shared security responsibility came up. And I want to bring it up because it's something that not all customers understand when they make the transition to the cloud, right? We offer, as cloud providers, we offer a pretty wide range of offerings, everything from SaaS services like Office 365 through PaaS, IaaS, and in some cases even kind of bare metal services that we operate on behalf of the customer. And it depends on where you are on that spectrum as a customer. There are different expectations on what you expected to do to secure your workload versus what we provide as a cloud vendor. In the SaaS case, for example, we provide security for the entire stack, from networking all the way up to the application. The administration and the data, of course, is under your control. And on the other hand of the spectrum, we have the bare metal, which, of course, we have very little say, and you are responsible for the entire stack. So it depends, depending where you are in that spectrum, the expectations are different. Which leads me to my last point for today, which is the work that we do with partners. Microsoft have, in addition to our standard engagement with ISVs, we also partner in the security space with peers, including some of our competitors, industry alliances, and governments. And that's important because at the end of the day, just by ourselves as Microsoft, we will never be able to really provide the level of security that we expect and provide the right level of security posture that we would like to have as a cloud operator. We've always, as a company, kind of fostered or lived up from by working very closely with ISVs, right? And that always, at the end of the day, benefited you, benefited the customers. And Check Point is one of those partners or very close partners that we've been working with over the past years on multiple levels. Some of those levels are on the technical engineering level, doing literally code development in some cases or joint engineering efforts. But it also manifests itself in our go-to-market and our ability to really tailor the right solutions both from a platform and Check Point different solutions to our customers. And that's something that's been superly well received over the past few years. And going back to my shared responsibility model, I think that the way that Check Point built CloudGuard really exemplifies how we think about shared responsibility model, where we in Azure and Microsoft provide all the platform, all the plumbing that Check Point needs in terms of the compute, storage, networking, security, infrastructure itself. Check Point's build on top of that with the more advanced functionality, the next generation firewall, advanced threat prevention, forensics, and so forth. The other element of the integration of CloudGuard with Azure, I think, works very well with the hybrid transition from on-prem Check Point implementations to the cloud implementation. The ability to transition a lot of my policies, a lot of my knowledge from my on-prem investments and deployments to the cloud. And that's something that's been received very, very well. So today we have really over 700 customers that adopted CloudGuard on top of Azure. The feedback that we're receiving is super positive. and something that if you haven't tried, I recommend that you go give it a try. As part of our close partnership with Checkpoint, we're holding, I think last year it was over 40 joint events and boot camps, and this year, 2018, I think we're planning for something about the same. It's a really good partnership and something that we're proud of at Microsoft and Azure. So just to kind of bring it all together, I know I'm a little bit over time, I'm going to repeat something I mentioned earlier. As we operate cloud services, we understand the responsibility that we're taking as a cloud operator. And when you as a customer trust us with your data, with your business, there is really no bigger responsibility to us as a cloud operator. So thank you.